When Abacha died in the early hours of Monday, June 8, 1998, many Nigerians did not know that their head of state had been partying all night till about 3:30 a.m. when his friend of 30 years, Lieutenant General Hussaini, left him alone to sleep. Abacha died before the dawn from a heart attack. Nigerians' limited knowledge of Abacha was not restricted to his constant partying. Nigerians just did not know Abacha. Sani Abacha was born on 20th September 1943 in the town of Kano, northern Nigeria. Abacha attended the Gidan Makama Primary School, Kano, before proceeding to the Provincial Secondary School, Kano. Abacha joined the Nigerian Military Training College, Kaduna in 1962 alongside Babangida, moving onwards to have a prolific military education in Aldershot and Warminster, both in the UK, and a stint at Monterey, USA. Abacha was commissioned into the Nigerian Army as second lieutenant in 1964, going on to become the first officer to achieve a 4-star general rank without skipping any rank and before becoming head of state. He married Mariam Jida, whom he met when he was in Rumfa College. They had 10 children together. In January 1966, a group of Nigerian soldiers within the rank of major eliminated top politicians and military chiefs in a coup. Northerners felt disgruntled because most of those assassinated were from their region. While the civilian Northerners tabled their discontent before political leaders, soldiers also did so in the barracks. Civilian and military leaders took diplomatic steps to call for justice, but young soldiers were not as patient as their civilian counterpart. The soldiers, including Abacha, went to meet Murtala Mohammed, who mutineered and eliminated the head of state, a southerner, and then killed over 30,000 people. When the Nigerian Civil War broke out, Abacha fought in Murtala's 2nd Division, where he was promoted twice before traveling out of Nigeria in 1972 for further training. The mutinous act of 1966 went unpunished, otherwise, that may have been the end of Abacha. After the Civil War, Abacha remained out of the public limelight until December 31, 1983, at which time he was commander of the 9th Mechanized Brigade in Ikeja, Lagos State. On that day, he teamed up with several of his decades-long military colleagues and friends, such as Babangida Buhari, Brigadier Generals Ibrahim Bako, Jerry Hussaini, and Colonel Joshua Dogonyaro, to overthrow President Shagari in a coup. This was another faction of the July 1966 mutineers taking over the government for the 3rd time. Abacha's reward in the 1983 coup was his promotion as the GOC of the 2nd Mechanized Division in Ibadan. Buhari was kicked out of government a year and a half later under the same pretext of corruption and ineptitude, which the democratically elected Shagari administration was overthrown. Abacha's 1983 coup speech had been described as a masterpiece adorning treason in patriotic garments. Abacha was becoming increasingly popular with coup plotting. When Babangida wanted to overthrow Buhari, he went to meet Abacha to get his support, and Abacha told him, "You are my chief, anything you say, I will do." On August 27, 1985, Buhari was overthrown and arrested. He remained in custody for more than 2 years. This time around, Abacha's reward was the Chief of Army Staff position. Babangida, a seasoned coup plotter himself, routinely dismantled the Armed Forces Ruling Council to prevent an overthrow of his government. Despite the constant shuffling of government, Abacha survived all purges and will be elevated when he saved Babangida from a coup in 1990 organized by officers from Nigeria's oil-producing South-South region. A grateful Babangida promoted Abacha to the rank of a 4-star general while also naming him as the Minister of Defense and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The press dubbed him Khalifa, the king in waiting. Babangida's fear and respect for Abacha, despite not being smart, would slip out when Babangida said, "He may not be bright upstairs, but he knows how to overthrow government and overpower coup plotters. He saw to my coming to office in 1985 and to my protection in many coups I faced." Babangida survived 2 coup attempts with Abacha on his side. After 8 tumultuous years of Babangida administration, Babangida organized a presidential election that was a tempest in Nigeria's political history. The 1993 election banned politicians from Nigeria's First and Second Republic from vying for office, with 2 political parties, Social Democratic Party and National Republican Convention, created by Babangida. Both parties fielded candidates MKO Abiola, a wealthy Western Nigerian Muslim businessman, for SDP, and Bashir Tofa, a Northern Muslim, for NRC. While this is a story of its own, it is important to mention that MKO had been friends with Abiola and Babangida for over 2 decades. Abiola amassed wealth through his relationship with the military and was sympathetic to the military rulers who were his friends. On July 10, 1993, a shady organization called the Association for Better Nigeria went to court to prevent the June 12 elections from holding. ABN was backed by a multi-millionaire magnate named Chief Francis Otto Nzeribe, an Igbo political fixer who had made his money in arms deals and sold weapons to warring sides during the Civil War. Even though ABN's objectives and origins were obscure, it had been campaigning for an extension of military rule. With Babangida no longer commanding public support, Abacha was next in line and would become the head of state if a military rule was to continue. This intrigue was lost on many people. ABN's lawyer, Abimbola Davis, will hold a press conference on July 16 where he confessed that, with the aim of prolonging military administration's stay in power, were used in order to create an organized confusion. All of us who participated in this racket never imagined that we'll end up in the situation that blood could be spilled. Abacha's intentional silence has been perceived by many as idiocy and allowed for great miscalculation on the part of many, including Babangida. That's why the court case filed by ABN that elections should not hold, Babangida announced on June 11 the elections will hold as promised. It is noteworthy that ABN was not a registered organization, did not have legal standing in the court of law. Elections held on June 12. By June 15, the National Electoral Commission had released results from 14 of the 30 states. The partial results showed that Abiola was on the course for a resounding victory. That was when the second phase of the plan was initiated. ABN went to court on June 15 to seek an injunction to stop NEC from releasing further election results. The Abuja High Court, under the Chief Judge of Abuja, Justice Dahiru Sali, ordered the NEC to stop releasing results. But this decision was not unanimous, as contrary judgments were then handed down by high courts in Lagos and Ibadan to release the remainder of the results. Lagos State High Court Judge Dolapo Akinsanya also issued a ruling restraining ABN from campaigning for an extension of Babangida's stay in power beyond August 27. On June 16, the National Defense and Security Council held a meeting where a committee was created to quickly investigate the aftermath of the election. The committee was headed by Abacha. Humphrey Nwansu, the chairman of NEC, at the committee meeting recommended that Abiola should be declared the winner. He was halted by General Abacha, who asked him, "Who do you think you are? You conducted a presidential election that the court prohibited. You helped cause the current confusion without the support of members of your commission." Abacha's plan was hatching. A faction of the military was brewing to prevent Abiola from becoming president. One of such persons was Brigadier General David Mark, who said, "I will shoot Chief Abiola the day NEC pronounces him the elected president." Mark was loyal to Babangida, but also had disagreement with Abiola when Mark was Minister of Communications. Like many top-ranking soldiers, they feared Abiola would exact vendetta on them upon assuming office. Abacha used the affairs to his advantage. While this theatrics was ongoing, Babangida was under constant pressure to relinquish power, but not to Abiola. Abacha was reported to have said, "Abiola retire me? God forbid." To put his pressure in perspective, Babangida's aides recalled military officers being in a combative mood and putting pressure on Babangida to retroactively void the election. When he attempted to explain the provisions of the transitions decrees to senior military officers, Professor Omori was sharply reminded by Lieutenant General Dogonyaro that this is a military government, professor, you are not part of it. Omori, Babangida's aide and political advisor, will recount a visit to Babangida in which he said Babangida was a different man. He was very different, morose, and killed in one corner of the sofa. In his account, Omori said Babangida told him, "They will kill me. They will kill the president-elect, Chief MK Abiola, if I went ahead with the elections and announced the winner." On June 23rd, the election was officially annulled through a letter that was written by Augustine Ekimo's press secretary, Nduka Irabo. The shocking thing was that the letter was not signed, dated, nor properly written. It was in fact a shock to many members of the FMG. David Mark said, "I'm not even sure Babangida was a major player in the annulment." On June 26, Babangida addressed the nation to confirm the annulment.
It is true that the presidential election was generally seen to be free, fair, and peaceful. However, there was in fact a huge array of electoral practices virtually in all the states of the Federation before the actual voting began.
As a swan song upon the annulment, which was still being challenged and protested, Babangida handed over to a transitional interim national government headed by Ernest Shonekan. There is a theory that Babangida promised Abacha the head of state position as a condition for supporting him in removing Buhari. Both parties neither admitted nor denied this. To give credence to this theory, Babangida had a meeting with Abacha where he overturned his decision to retire his service chiefs with him, and instead he inserted a clause in the decree, specifically stipulating that in the event of a crisis that made it impossible for the ING to function, the Secretary of Defense, being the most senior among the secretaries, should take over. Abacha was the Secretary of Defense. The ING consisted of politicians from SDP, NRC and FMG, but this did not pacify Nigerians, especially from Abiola's southwest region, who protested defiantly. Many southeastern Nigerians returned home, fearing that this may be another program. The emigration was called Oso Abiola. Abiola escaped. While this was ongoing, politicians were also scheming across the country on how to reclaim the government. NS Shonika and ING never enjoyed nationwide legitimacy, with attacks from all parts of the country destabilizing the administration. Oil workers went on strike, airports were locked, Nigerian Labour Congress went to war, and National Union of Petroleum and Natural Gas Workers joined the strike, and students also protested. Abiola was hell-bent on assuming office, and the military was not in support of Abiola. The October 1st editorial of Daily Times described Nigeria as a country tribe in the clashing selfish subnational agenda of factions of the ruling class. Abacha, a man of little words, did not make his intentions clear, but continued to gather support and sympathy. The military refused to help Shonekan stabilize the country as Nigeria continued to lose money because of the strike. This was the final phase of Abacha's plan. Abacha had been using a trick he learned from Babangida, coup baiting. Soldiers used frustrations to gather support while blackmailing and abusing the efforts of civilian leaders. This time, because of Nigeria's collapsing economy, Abacha did not necessarily have to pay newspapers to publish articles against Shonekan's government. The work was half done by civil rights activists and union leaders. On November 3, 1993, popular human rights activist Gani Fahmi said the military must intervene to stop this rot, to stop this war of Shonekan's government against the people. The problems in question were created by the military and were also allowed to fester by the military, which was part of Shonekan's government. Yet Shonekan took all the blame for it. Abiola also contributed to this contraption by believing that the military was on his side. He advocated for the military to take over, stabilize the country and announce him as president.
It will continue off and on until the military release the result of the June 12 election and put the democratically elected president, who is myself, in charge of affairs. I won't go to war. I won't encourage my supporters to go to war. I will fight for peace, and we will get peace.
Abiola's lousy nature soon forced him to spill that a reliable general was there for him in the army. Abiola's biggest friend in the army were Abacha and Babangida. Babangida had been forced to leave the government, leaving only one general that comes to mind, Abacha. Abiola mentioned on September 28 that I really commend General Sani Abacha because of his love for this country. He puts his common sense, experience, tact, and intellect to ease out Babangida. I have no doubt that it is that common sense, that patriotism that will ease out Babangida's surrogates too. Some believe that Shonekan was Babangida's stooge. On November 17, 1993, Sani Abacha, Oladipo Dia, and Aliyu Mohammed Gusau met with NS Shonekan. Abacha asked Shonekan if he was going to resign. The officer did not take Shonekan's cooperation for granted. They had made contingency plan to deploy armored tanks in Lagos and Abuja if he refused to go. Shonekan resigned around 8 p.m.
When Chief Shonekan was to tender his resignation, were you one of those officers who had an agreement with General Abacha?
No, I have not come into the, as my friend or my officer Mustafa said, I'm inner tackle, but inner tackle, but not inner tackle.
Sequel to the resignation of the former head of the interim national government and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Chief Ernest Shonekan, and my subsequent appointment as head of state and Commander-in-Chief, I have had extensive consultations within the Armed Forces hierarchy and other well-meaning Nigerians in a bid to find solutions to the various political, economic, and social problems which have engulfed our beloved country and which have made life most difficult to the ordinary citizens of this nation.
Before forcing the interim national government of NS Shonekan to resign, Abacha had served as second in command to General Ibrahim Babangida for 8 years and had been involved in all of Nigeria's successful coup from July 1966 till 1998, except in 1975. In describing Abacha, Babangida said he's a man of very limited words. He doesn't talk a lot. You can't predict him. When Abacha became head of state, media outlets had only one paragraph recitation of his military achievement. Abacha's inaugural broadcast as head of state was the 4th time he will address Nigerians. Abacha's silence was not the only power he had over his adversaries. Taking a cue from Babangida, Abacha retired many senior officers, especially those loyal to Babangida. One of the victims of the retirement was David Mark. Mark eventually granted an interview where he divulged that Abacha had met some civil rights activists and monarchs in advance before taking over from the ING. The regime was supposed to end dramatically on December 31st, 1999, but Abacha switched the plan, betrayed the officer who worked towards the annulment of the June 12 election and subsequent theatrics, and was on the path to making himself president for life. In Mark's words, Abacha's regime qualified for his space in the Guinness Book of Record as the greatest betrayal of the century. One can only imagine why David Mark was so hot. Was it nationalism or removal from the corruption-laden national cake? Abacha never responded to allegations against him, barely addressed Nigerians, and when he did, it was often in interviews granted to journalists from outside the country. Abacha did not only kill his enemies with silence, but also imprisoned them. On June 22, 1994, Abiola organized a rally where he declared himself as president.
Assuming there was good faith on the part of government, all matters relating to the election should have gone to the tribunal set up by law for such cases, and should only have been initiated by persons or bodies that had genuine interest in the election. Instead, we are being told that the judiciary behaved so badly that I, Moshood Abiola, should be penalized for his conduct. It is incredible. In view of all this, I find the conclusion unfortunate but inescapable that the federal military government is guilty of bad faith, pure and simple.
This was, of course, after Abacha's reluctance to cede power to him. Abacha's betrayal wound hit Abiola. In response to the declaration, Abiola was arrested. Equating himself in Nelson Mandela, Abiola was telling a BBC reporter in a phone interview that he would come out of detention to become president. He said he wouldn't be the first African leader to do it.
They are arresting me on an allegation of felony, nameless treason or something like that. They are not doing anything, they are just taking me away. Please let me go. I'm delaying them.
Abiola's prison to president fantasy was misplaced. Abacha was no longer his friend. He was at war. NSA leaders and some Abiola sympathizers tried to get him out of detention on the condition that he lays low for a while. Abiola refused despite being appealed to by Dia, Abacha's second in command, and Oba Tejoso of Oke-Ona, Egbaland. Abacha heard about the plot and started distrusting Dia. Abiola's litigation team also went to court to ask for his release. Unfortunately, Abiola's newspaper Concord had accused 9 out of the 11 Supreme Court judges of being compromised for receiving gifts of Mercedes-Benz from Babangida. 8 out of the judges sued Abiola, and the libel case was still in court. This meant that there will not be impartial judges and not credible enough to hear Abiola's case. Abacha refused to appoint new judges. Abiola ended up spending the rest of his life in detention, dying on the day he was supposed to gain freedom. He was not alone in Abacha's prison. Abacha's next stop was Sheikh Yaradua, another coup profiteer. Yaradua retired from the military alongside Obasanjo in 1979. During Nigeria's civil war, both Abacha and Yaradua served in Multra 2nd Division. When Yaradua went to Pakistan in 1974 to attend a 10-month course at the Command and Staff College in Quetta, he sold his Mercedes 280 Coupe to Abacha. There was also a complex family dynamic between them. Abacha was not his wife Mariam's first husband. Her first husband was Yaradua's father-in-law, Shehu Usman, the Sarki Musa of Funtua district in Kastina. Usman was the father of Yaradua's wife Binta. Mariam was briefly married to Usman for 1 or 2 years before divorcing him and later marrying Abacha in 1965. Yaradua re-emerged as a politician in Nigeria's botched Third Republic. He wanted to contest for Nigerian presidency. He was incapacitated by Babangida's refusal to admit old politicians into the Third Republic. He was a patron of the SDP, the party Abiola had contested under. Since Abacha emerged, Yaradua was constantly pressuring him to tell the public when his government would be leaving. Abacha's only response was communicated through Dia when he said, "Our stay will be brief." Also, Yar'Adua's constant protests pushed Abacha to hastily form a constitutional conference where delegates went to sleep, wake up, eat, attend brief meeting and cocktails, eat and sleep. There was a second conference where Yar'Adua was able to get delegates to give the military government a deadline of July 1st, 1996. Abacha was enraged. He reportedly said, "I will get him, including that Obasanjo." Obasanjo's crime was similar to that of Yar'Adua. They had both condemned General Abacha's government. Since leaving power, former head of state General Obasanjo had been in the habit of criticizing all his successors: Shagari, Buhari, Babangida, Shonekan, and now Abacha. Shagari sent his secretary to the government to meet Obasanjo and ask him why he was criticizing him. Babangida reportedly met Obasanjo for advice. Obasanjo had a string of international connections that made him feared and valued, but Abacha feared no one. Also, while other heads of state could not arrest Obasanjo for fear of public outcry, Abacha was busy jailing the public, the press, and their cries. Obasanjo was a stepping stone. To deal with Obasanjo and Yar'Adua, who were both friends and a thorn in his flesh, Abacha first arrested Yar'Adua, then Obasanjo, who was out of the country when Yar'Adua was arrested, but chose to return nonetheless. Obasanjo's continued detention was more controversial, as US President Jimmy Carter traveled to Nigeria on behalf of Obasanjo to appeal for his release. Obasanjo was then kept under house arrest in his farm in Ota for 2 months, until June 14, when armed soldiers took him from his farmhouse to the army's officers' mess. Before Obasanjo's arrest in February, the prolific rumor mill claimed that there had been an attempted coup against Abacha and the government was secretly investigating suspects. Many people were arrested and tortured in connection to the said coup. Most of those arrested were journalists, politicians, activists, military officers not in support of Abacha, and retired officers. Abacha set up a special investigation panel led by Brigadier General Felix Majokporo to investigate the coup allegations. Felix was brutal in his approach. One of his henchmen was Colonel Frank Omenka, who was described as a ruthless interrogator with a large bag of physical and psychological tools he used on his detainees to extract information. One of his victims, Lieutenant Colonel Martin Azuka Igwe, said, "They tied my hands and legs behind me all together and they put a pipe through my elbow, raised me up and I was suspended like a chicken in a barbecue. Then they were asking me questions, hitting me, abusing me, saying that I must accept to have planned the coup. The chief torturers were Lieutenant Colonel Frank Omenka and Hassan Zakari Biu." Another victim, Colonel Gabriel Ajayi, who had openly advocated for validation of June 12 election, was, according to him, brutalized, demeaned, dehumanized, humiliated, pulverized, tied up, tied down, chained to the wall, chained to the ceiling, abused, tied up like a barbecue ram, turned upside down and insulted. They wanted me to confess and make a statement for offense I did not commit. On June 5, 1995, the accused faced a special military tribunal. All of them pleaded not guilty. The coup trial of 1995 was a first, with over 300 military personnel and civilians arrested, tortured to admit committing a non-existent coup. The coup was tagged a phantom coup, and journalists who reported that it was a ruse were equally arrested. Chris Anyanwu, a popular Nigerian journalist working with the Sunday magazine, was arrested and sentenced to life imprisonment, which was commuted to 15 years for reporting on a failed coup d'etat. Within 2 months of seizing power in November 1993, General Abacha's military government began a series of attacks on the media aimed at bending it to his will. The government had been provoked above all by the activities of vibrant independent press, which had been prominent in calling for an immediate and unconditional return to civilian rule. In furtherance of this, Abacha considered the creation of a press court. A special press court would try journalists accused of making false reports. The regime would subjectively determine what a false report was, and punish journalists accordingly. From November 1993, dozens of journalists working for the independent press have been arbitrarily arrested and detained incommunicado without charge or trial for prolonged periods. Hundreds more have been arrested and briefly detained, sometimes repeatedly, by security agents of the government, either as a warning to them not to pursue sensitive or controversial stories or as punishment for stories already published. Journalists were detained under Decree 2, which precluded detainees from going to any court and made them incommunicado. When it was difficult to arrest a journalist, the regime would detain people close to them. In 1993, security agents arrested and briefly detained Ladi Oloriyomi, wife of Dapo Oloriyomi, and their 3-month-old baby, Aramide, when security men could not find him at home. He was arrested again in March 1997 and only released after 48 days in detention. In some cases, journalists went missing without a trace. Baguda Kalto, a senior correspondent for the news magazine who was based in Kaduna, disappeared in March 1996. Before his disappearance, Kalto was being sought by security agents from the Directorate of Military Intelligence about stories he had written about the alleged March 1995 coup plot, over which 4 other journalists have been jailed by a special military tribunal. Another journalist soon faced the same fate. Chinedu Ofaro, a reporter with the Guardian newspaper, went missing in May 1996. He is reported to have left Lagos for Owerri, a city in eastern Nigeria 555 kilometers away from Lagos, on 24th May and was expected back 2 days later. He has since been reported as killed. This hard approach was extended to newspaper vendors. In March 1996, Jude Sine, a vendor in Bori, Rivers State, was arrested at his newsstand by security officials. His offense was to have been selling seditious independent journals and newspapers. He was detained and kept incommunicado without trial. As if illegal detaining, kidnapping and killing journalists were not enough, the regime also burned media houses. During the night of 16 December 1995, the headquarters of the Guardian newspaper, which had been reopened only a few months earlier after a year-long ban, was set ablaze by unknown arsonists who sprayed petrol on the premises. The circulation department was substantially burned, and only quick action by firefighters saved the entire building from being completely burned. On 31st December 1995, unknown persons also burnt the office of the Independent Communications Network Limited, publishers of the news, Tempo and Tempo Footballs in Lagos. This time the damage was serious, destroying property worth millions of naira. Babangida had in the past claimed that Abacha was not bright upstairs and was only good at coup plotting. Abacha once again proved him wrong by importing decrees made by Babangida and making them even hellish in execution. Nigerian Press Council Decree No. 85 of 1992 and Newspaper Decree No. 43 of 1993 were enacted by Babangida to tame journalism, but were effectively weaponized by Abacha. National Broadcasting Commission Decree No. 32 of 1992 allowed for private ownership of media houses, but also allowed the regime to give licenses only to friends or to revoke licenses. Babangida also created tyrannical defamation laws. From 1991, courts tended to award exceedingly high damages against publishers found guilty of libel. Some of the damages awarded have been such that they have threatened the very existence of the newspapers and magazines against which they have been made. A practical example of this abuse was evident in January 1994, when 9 justices of the Supreme Court, including the then Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Mohammed Bello, and his successor, Justice Muhammadu Lawal Owais, sued the Concord Press Nigeria Limited, publishers of Weekend Concord, for 450 million damages for libel over an alleged defamatory publication in the December 1993 issue entitled Justice Mohammed Bello, Kick Him Out Now, Lawyers Demand. What the Concord reported was a bribe of luxury cars provided to the judges by Babangida. The Concord thought such gifts would interfere with the independence of the judiciary. Journalists also suffered in the Phantom Coup of 1995. 4 journalists were tried secretly by Special Military Tribunal on charges of being accessories after the fact of treason for writing stories about an alleged coup plot to topple the military government of General Sani Abacha. They were initially sentenced to life in prison in July 1995, but this was later commuted to 15 years imprisonment. The journalists served their sentences until Abacha died in 1998. Ken Saro Wiwa was a Nigerian playwright, activist and administrator. Ken was born in Ogoniland in Nigeria's South-South region and suffered ethnic chauvinism even as a student at Government College Umuahia in Nigeria's Southeast region dominated by the Igbos. The Ogoni people are one of the many ethnic minority groups constituting Nigeria's South-South region known as the Niger Delta. In 1956, Nigeria discovered oil in Oloibiri, a Niger Delta community. The oil-producing region belonged to Nigeria and such produce from it belonged to the country. As Nigeria progressed and more oil was discovered in the Niger Delta region, people in the oil-producing region expected infrastructural development but saw little. In 1958, Royal Dutch and Shell began using land in Ogoniland for oil production. Pollution resulting from the oil production contaminated the local water supply and agricultural land upon which the region's economy is based. In February 1966, an Ijaw police officer was fired from service after leading a group called the Niger Delta Volunteer Force in declaring the oil-producing region a republic due to the economic inequality suffered by the region. Agoyin Ironsi, an Igbo head of state, sentenced him to death, which was committed after he agreed to fight for Nigeria during the Civil War. In 1967, Nigeria went into a civil war when the Igbo Southeast seceded from the rest of the country. Saro Wiwa and other Nigerian Delta supported Nigeria especially because they did not want to substitute minority subject status in Nigeria for minority subject status in new Igbo-dominated country. Saro Wiwa was appointed as the administrator of Bonny Island on November 11, 1968, when he was just 26. He soon switched portfolio as he became the Commissioner for Works, Land and Transport before becoming the first Commissioner for Education in Rivers State in 1969. Saro Wiwa used his position as Education Commissioner to develop education in Ogoni land, making many youths loyal to him. Saro Wiwa's involvement with the government helped him to solidify strong alliances with military men, becoming very close to T.Y. Danjuma, Olusegun Obasanjo, and Sani Abacha, who lived next door to him in Inzimi Road Street in Port Harcourt, causing their children to become playmates. Nigeria witnessed an oil boom in the 1970s, with earnings from crude oil rising by 500%. Despite the oil boom, Nigeria barely recorded a rise in per capita income for 25 years, from 1970 to 1995. Nigeria's funds were being siphoned by a few as over 40,000 oil spills occur in Niger Delta region, killing aquaculture for the poor farmers in the region. Gas flaring from these companies also contaminated rivers and farmlands, killing economic activities in the region, while the proceeds from the Niger Delta lands were being used to develop other regions in the country. Different groups rose during this period to protect the injustice being done to them. In January 1990, the Movement for the Survival of the Ogoni People, MOSOP, was funded to demand royalties for the oil extracted from Ogoni land and for compensation for environmental damage caused by oil drilling, among other things. The MOSOP also drafted a Bill of Rights that was signed by 30 prominent Ogoni leaders, including the head of the 6 Ogoni clans. MOSOP's president was Gary Barili Letton, former Federal Commissioner for Education in Nigeria, and the vice president was Edward Kobani, also a former commissioner. The publicity secretary was the influential Saro Wiwa, who was responsible for drafting the Bill of Rights. Refusing to listen to the appeals, MOSOP organized the Ogoni Day rally in July 1993, mobilizing 60% of the Ogoni populace. At this time, Babangida was the head of state, and he invited MOSOP to Abuja in meetings where the National Security Advisor and Director of Military Intelligence were present. The Ogoni activists did not know that the government was baiting them, waiting for when the peaceful protests will have a bite at violence so they can swoop in and play the hero. By April 1993, the MOSOP was beginning to suffer ideological differences with older Ogoni men, accusing the youths led by Saro Wiwa of trying to hijack the movement. Saro Wiwa had also inducted several other organizations to MOSOP. He claimed it was to strengthen the movement. But Letton and Kobani, parties who prevent negotiation to confrontation, accused Saro Wiwa of using the new groups to have majority in MOSOP. As if trying to prove them right, Saro Wiwa, without consultation, granted an interview with CNN saying that Ogonis would boycott the June 12, 1993 election. MOSOP had an internal election to decide if they should boycott or not. Saro Wiwa prevailed. In the ensuing disagreement, Letton and Kobani resigned from MOSOP. Saro Wiwa became the new MOSOP leader, alongside Mite and Poinen. In the period after the failed Nigerian Third Republic, as Nigeria struggled with leadership, Ogoni mirrored it. Despite this challenge, the goal in Ogoni was the same: protection of the Niger Delta against oil extraction that was damaging their land. It was only the method that differed. Conflict soon started ensuing among the Ogonis. They started as verbal confrontation and erupted to physical conflict. Saro Wiwa was arrested a couple of times and released. Abacha even apologized to him on one of such occasions. Although it seems Abacha was still his friend, even offering Saro Wiwa a ministerial appointment at the Petroleum Ministry, there was more to his kindness. Not seeing the trap being prepared for him, Saro Wiwa appealed to Abacha to protect the Ogonis from communal crashes from their neighbors. Abacha appointed Major Paul Okuntimo as the head of the Rivers State Internal Security Task Force. Paul, on May 12, 1994, sent a memorandum that read, "Shell operations still impossible unless ruthless military operations are undertaken for smooth economic activities to commence." He recommended wasting operations. This was the beginning of the end. There were a series of attacks on Shell properties by Ogonis as part of their protestation against the pollution being done to their land. Shell, in protecting their properties, has at different times paid the Nigerian Army and the Nigerian Police Force to protect them against these attacks. Shell officials have admitted requesting assistance from Nigerian military authorities to defend the company's installations. While Shell suspended production in Ogoni land in mid-1993 in the face of increasing local and international protests, the abuses set in motion by Shell's reliance on military protection there were heinous.
Now, you cannot have democracy without the protection of minority rights. For any society to be properly governed, to have good government also, there must be accountability. What is happening in Nigeria is robbery, is brigandage, it's not government. And it is the responsibility of writers like myself and other well-meaning people to fight it. And I believe that the international community is in a much better position to listen now, since the end of the Cold War has meant that we must face issues differently from what we used to do in the past.
Paul's task force was also responsible for suppressing protests by communities in other oil-producing areas with similar grievances. In the aftermath of the military raids on villages associated with indigenous movement, community leaders have been detained without charge or faced trials by ad hoc courts. In one of those attacks, hundreds of Ogonis were arrested, killed or maimed. At a press conference, Paul mentioned that they would shoot guns at night to intimidate people and shoot them in the open as they ran out of the houses. They used grenades to send them into the bush in the middle of the night. Expectedly, there were reprisals. On 21st May 1994, 4 consecutive Ogoni leaders were killed in Gokana by an angry mob that believed the 4 leaders were pro-government. The wake of the murders, which occurred under disputed circumstances, the Rivers State Internal Security Task Force embarked on a series of punitive raids on Ogoni villages. These raids were characterized by flagrant human rights abuses, including extrajudicial executions, indiscriminate shooting, arbitrary arrest and detention, flogging, rapes, looting, and extortion, which violates Nigeria's obligation under international law and the Nigerian constitution. Even though Saro Wiwa was not at the scene of the mob justice, nor were they able to prove that he had any direct role to play in the attack, the Abacha government thought that was the perfect opportunity to deal with Saro Wiwa. He was arrested in connection with the crisis. Saro Wiwa and other Mosob chieftains alongside several other Ogoni people were detained for 9 months before facing trial in February 1995. The stated authority for the establishment of the tribunal is the Civil Disturbance Decree of 1987, as amended by the Special Tribunal Edict 1994. The Special Tribunal Edict, which has retroactive effect from December 10, 1993, permits the death penalty for capital offences committed in connection with civil disturbances, as well as previously non-capital crimes including attempted murder. The tribunal's judgment is not subject to review by higher court, but only to the confirmation by the Provisional Ruling Council, which is chaired by the head of state. On January 11, 1995, Chief Gani Fahmi, who represented Saro Wiwa, Mite and Poinon, filed a suit in the Federal High Court in Lagos challenging the composition of the tribunal and the lack of any provision for review by a higher court. On March 27, the Federal High Court issued a decision that it lacked jurisdiction to decide on the issue. At this point, it was obvious that the government was not interested in a fair trial, but the elimination of Saro Wiwa. On October 31, 1995, the tribunal found Saro Wiwa and 8 other defendants guilty and sentenced them to death by hanging. Appeals came from the USA, UK, Commonwealth of Nations and Nelson Mandela that Abacha should commute the death sentence of Saro Wiwa and another 8 Ogoni leaders. In his typical manner, Abacha kept mute. On November 10, 1995, the day the Commonwealth Head of State meetings started, the Ogoni 9 were executed. Several countries called their high commissioners. Nigeria faced a ban from the Commonwealth and closed doors from other countries. After retiring Maduke and Chris Ali, Abacha became even more paranoid about his security and created strike force and special bodyguards, in addition to the brigade of guards directly responsible for protecting the president. These new units were headed by Abacha's chief security officer, Hamza Al-Mustafa, a military intelligence officer from Yobe State. Al-Mustafa became Abacha's de facto gatekeeper with the ability to closet him away or grant access. Anybody who wanted to see Abacha had to go through Al-Mustafa. Abacha was so full of paranoia that he rarely traveled outside Nigeria, and his itinerary was a closely guarded secret between Hamza and the National Security Advisor, Ismaila Garzo. Hamza's job description was not limited to defensive protection. He also launched offensives. The Asu Rock assassins were introduced. The adoption of the assassination by Abacha is best summarized in the words of Niccolo Machiavelli. In every case, especially that of a prince, where there is no appeal, the end justifies the means. High-profile assassinations were conducted during the regime, the like of which Nigeria had never seen before. Hired killing of key national figures, popularly referred to as state-organized murders, believed to have serious political undertone, became pronounced during the regime of late dictator General Sani Abacha. That was the era when Pa Alfred Rawane, Alhaja Kudirat Abiola, Alhaja Suliat Adedeji, Architect Lai Balogun, and Major General Musa Yaradua, just to mention a few, were killed. There were also a series of assassination attempts during this period. Prominent among these were the Afenifere leader and Nadeko's central figure, Pa Abraham Adesanya, and the publisher of the Guardian newspaper, Mr. Alex Ibo. The victim of this assassination had 3 things in common. They protested against Abacha's leadership, they had great political influence, they were brutally murdered, and their deaths were never investigated or resolved. Kudirat Abiola, the wife of MK Abiola, presidential candidate of June 12, 1993 general election, was brutally murdered when she was shot by gunmen in Peugeot 504 and 504 cars on the streets of Lagos in her car on June 4, 1996. Late Kudirat Abiola was in the forefront of her husband's political ambition, trying to see that he made it through even while he was in prison. Pa Alfred Rewani was shot in the sitting room by men who bypassed security with a sticker of live flour mills, one of Rewani's company, on their Peugeot 504 car, while also speaking his native Isikiri language. The killers took nothing except Rewani's life from the crime scene. Alex Ibru, the owner of Guardian newspaper, was also attacked with AK-47 rifles by the infamous 504 assassins. Ibru escaped with his life but lost his body parts to the attack. In June 1999, after Abacha's death, the famous Oputa panel was inaugurated to investigate the mishaps of Nigeria's military regimes. During one of the sessions, Sergeant Barnabas Debila, popularly known as Captain Rogas, confessed to receiving instructions from Al-Mustafa to carry out several assassinations. Rogas also said that in 1996, Al-Mustafa sent him and 11 other strike force members to Lagos, where they met Bamayi and Lieutenant Colonel Jibril Bala Yakubu, who gave them instruction to assassinate Kudirat Abiola, RX Ibru, Ibrahim Adesanya, Bola Ige, Olusegun Osoba. Rogas admitted to murdering Kudirat, receiving given guns used during ECOMOG peacekeeping missions in Liberia and Sierra Leone to avoid the ammunition being traced back to them. Despite confessional statements, incriminating shred of evidence provided, and a protracted litigation period, nobody was punished for the assassination conducted under Abacha's regime, as all defendants have been discharged and acquitted. Abacha was not only great at executing people he thought troublesome, he was great at making money disappear. While the exact amount embezzled in his regime has not been ascertained, Abacha alone is believed to have personally stolen between 1 billion and 3 billion while in office, without considering other embezzlement perpetrated indirectly for him, or by others for themselves under his administration. In September 2002, Mohammed, Abacha's son, agreed to repay over 1 billion to the Nigerian government. Several Abacha loot have since been returned from different governments, totaling about $6 billion. Some of the ways Abacha looted the Nigerian treasury was by awarding contract to front companies, accepting massive bribes, and by siphoning money directly from the Nigerian treasury. Someday, we'll have a well-detailed insight into the extent of the wastage perpetrated during his regime. In October 1995, under pressure to implement political reforms, Abacha announced a 3-year transition program to civilian rule, which he tightly controlled until his death on June 8, 1998. Abacha established the National Electoral Commission of Nigeria, NECON, which published guidelines for party registration, recognized 5 political parties in September 1996, and officially dissolved opposition group after refusing to recognize them. The military professed his support for Abacha should he seek re-election as a civilian, and by April 20, 1998, all 5 political parties had nominated Abacha as the single presidential candidate despite criticism by the international community and dissident group. Major opposition figures, especially those in exile, dismissed the transition program and called for boycott of the parliamentary and the presidential elections. Only candidates from among the 5 state-sanctioned political parties participated in the state assembly elections held in December 1997 and parliamentary elections held in 25th April 1998. The United Nigeria Congress Party, considered by many government opponents to be the army's proxy, won widespread victories. For posterity's sake, Nigerians like Lamidi Adedibu, Chief Otto Eze, Nathaniel Zome, Olusola Saraki, Bello Alkali, Oton Zeribe, Alhaji Salih Hassan, 74 traditional rulers across Nigeria led by Alhaji Muhammadu Masido, Ariso Kola Alao, Dan Kabo, Abba Kyari, Tanko Yakasai, Ibrahim Tahir, and a host of others supported the continuity of Abacha regime either through life perpetuation or by contesting as a civilian. 2 things united all Abacha supporters: greed and fear. The arrests, detention, and murders conducted during the transition period ensured that most key political actors are either dead or in detention or exile or sidelined, thereby impoverishing both political discourse and action in the country. Abacha was on the path to making himself a dictator, possibly for life. What was rather ironic was that Abacha helped to restore democracy in Sierra Leone and had an overwhelming contribution to ECOMOG peacekeeping mission in Liberia. Yet he was a dictator back in Nigeria and was not willing to cede power. But fate had other plans. On Sunday, June 7, 1998, Abacha was at the presidential villa entertaining guests late into the night. Abacha had few visitors, most of whom were close friends or loyalists. Abacha's friend of 30 years, the FCT minister, Lieutenant General Hussaini, was with Abacha till about 3:30 a.m. when he left him. Abacha and Hussein are inseparable party bets, and Hussein mentioned that oftentimes he will wait up till 11 or 12 midnight so that he will have finished with all those who will normally take their problems to him. Unbeknownst to many, Abacha had underlying health conditions, which were known to a few. He was heavy on medications the last few years of his life. Both Bamayi and Dia considered his health complication. Someone who saw Abacha the moment he died recalled his surprise when he became noticeably out of breath after climbing up a flight of stairs. After Hussein left Abacha that night, some of his guards observed that he was unwell. Al-Mustafa was informed and he quickly called the state house physician, Professor Suleiman Wali. Wali noted that by the time he got to the villa, Abacha was unconscious and was foaming from the mouth with very feeble heartbeat and was almost dead. 40 minutes later, Wali confirmed Abacha's death. Abacha died from a heart attack overnight on June 8, 1998. At 54, Abacha was a party bed who had been involved with 7 coups from a military career spanning 32 years, participated in the Civil War, and has had to live under intense paranoia for the past 11 years of his life. Although he had been partying with his friend, the night Abacha died, there had been no Apple or Indian prostitute, as apocryphal legend put it. Popular Nigerian activist Gani Fahmi famously said, "We thank God that he passed away. He was a thoroughly evil man and wicked man. Everybody is jubilant, and I have no doubt in my mind that he will go to the hottest part of hell." He lived discreetly and died discreetly. Many Nigerians did not know Abacha had died until he had been flown to Kano where he was buried. The news of his death was broken by foreign media. Partying broke out in different parts of the country. Abacha had finally met his end.